I didn't realize I was trapped at first. It started as a small inconvenience, an unexpected detour that turned into a closed gate. I was returning home just after dusk when I saw the new fencing. Fresh posts, fresh wire, and a heavy steel gate where there had never been one before. Locked. I stepped out of the truck and stared at it, confused. My driveway curved through a narrow strip of land before reaching the road. I'd driven it for years without issue. Now, there was a sign zip-tied to the gate. HOA access control, no trespassing. I laughed once, under my breath. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. I checked my phone. No emails. No notices. No meeting minutes. Nothing warning me that the HOA had decided to control access to a road I'd been using long before most of them moved in. I tried the side path. Blocked. Another fence had gone up there too, hastily installed but effective. Whoever did this hadn't aimed for elegance. They aimed for containment. That's when it clicked. They hadn't just restricted access. They'd boxed me in. I walked the perimeter as daylight faded, boots crunching on gravel, following the fence line until it looped back on itself. Every direction out, north, south, east, was sealed. The only way in or out of my property now ran through land the HOA controlled. Except for one thing. They'd forgotten the western boundary. I didn't know it yet, but that oversight was about to matter more than anything else. At the time, all I felt was a low, steady anger. Not explosive. Not loud. The kind that tightens your jaw and makes you very careful with your next move. I called the HOA's after-hours number. Straight to voicemail. I left a calm message. Gave my name. Explained that I appeared to be locked inside my own property and needed access restored immediately. No response. I waited an hour. Then another. The sky went dark. The air cooled. Still nothing. I could have cut the fence. I had tools. It would have taken 5 minutes. But I didn't. Because the moment you damage something, even something illegally placed, you give people like this exactly what they want, a distraction from their mistake. Instead, I documented everything. Photos of the gate. Close-ups of the lock. Wide shots showing how the fencing encircled my land. Time-stamped video walking the perimeter. Then I pulled out my property survey. The western edge was different. It wasn't HOA land. It was mine. A narrow gravel easement cut through it, leading directly to the county road. I'd rarely used it because it was rough and longer. But it was legal, recorded, and unmistakably private. That was the exit they didn't control. And the only one they couldn't block without crossing a line they clearly hadn't researched. By the time the HOA president finally called back, nearly 3 hours later, I was already standing at that western boundary, looking at the open space they'd ignored. She sounded annoyed. She said the gate was temporary. She said it was for community safety. She said I could coordinate access during business hours. I told her something very simple. You don't get to decide when I'm allowed to leave my own property. She paused. Then she said, well, all access roads run through HOA land. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. No, I said. They don't. And that was the moment the balance shifted, quietly, decisively, before the HOA even realized they were. The next morning, the HOA doubled down. I woke up to an email marked, urgent, access violation. It claimed I had no right to use the western path, that it was informal, unmaintained, and not intended for regular traffic. The language was confident, almost scolding, written by someone who assumed repetition could replace research. I forwarded it to my attorney. Then, I went outside. The western route wasn't pretty. It dipped slightly, cut between trees, and showed the wear of something used when necessary, not advertised. But the survey pins were still there. Old, rusted, and exactly where the county records said they'd be. I drove it slowly, tires crunching, and reached the county road without crossing a single inch of HOA land. Freedom tends to clarify things. By mid-morning, a pickup truck with the HOA logo rolled up to the new gate on the east side. 2 board members stood there, talking in low voices, staring at the fence like it had personally betrayed them. One of them noticed me approaching from the west and froze. They hadn't expected that. I stopped a few yards away and waited. No waving. No confrontation. Just presence. One of them finally said, "You can't use that." I asked, "Why not?" "It's not an approved exit." I nodded. Approved by who? Silence. They pulled out their phones, made calls, walked the line again, measuring with their eyes. One of them knelt to look at the survey marker, brushing dirt away like it might disappear if ignored long enough. It didn't. An hour later, I got another call from the HOA president. Her tone had changed, less certainty, more edge. She said the western access was under review. She said they'd temporarily allow its use while things were sorted out. She said the gate was for the greater good. I asked her one question. "Did you verify how many properties you enclosed before you locked that gate?" She didn't answer. Instead, she warned me that using the western route might create liability issues for the HOA. I told her that blocking a legal exit already had. That's when she said it. The community has the right to control movement for safety. I corrected her. You don't control movement on land you don't own. That afternoon, I received a notice of violation. It cited unauthorized use of an unapproved access point. No statute. No bylaw reference. Just assertion. We responded with the deed, the recorded easement, and a formal demand to restore access immediately. We CC'd the county. That was the moment the HOA realized this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mistake. Because once the county's name appears on an email, posturing tends to stop. Titles get checked. Maps get pulled. And people who've been acting on assumptions suddenly discover how thin it really is. By evening, a county official called me directly. He asked if I was aware the HOA had installed fencing that blocked my primary exit. I said yes. He sighed and said, "That's a problem. Not for me. For them." Because the western route wasn't just my exit. It was their only legal access to a utility corridor they'd been using for years, one that crossed my land under a recorded easement they'd conveniently forgotten. And by locking me in, they'd reminded me exactly where their escape ran. Quietly. In writing. And very much on my terms. The HOA didn't respond for 2 days. No emails. No calls. No notices taped to my gate. That silence told me everything. They weren't ignoring the problem. They were scrambling, pulling records, calling lawyers, rereading documents they should have understood before they ever poured concrete or hung a lock. On the third morning, a utility truck pulled up near the western corridor. The driver got out, clipboard in hand, and stopped short when he saw the private property, "No access without permission" sign I'd posted the night before. He looked confused. I walked over calmly and asked if I could help. He said he was scheduled to inspect a fiber line that served half the HOA community. He pointed toward the corridor. "That runs through here," he said. I nodded. "It does." He checked his paperwork again. Then he looked at the sign. Then back at me. "Are you the owner?" "I am." He hesitated. "The HOA told us they had access rights." "They do," I said. "When they don't lock me inside my own land." He made a call. 10 minutes later, his supervisor called me. Then the HOA president called him. Then my phone rang again. This time, her voice wasn't sharp. It was careful. She said the fencing had been misinterpreted. She said the gate placement was unfortunate. She said they were working toward a cooperative solution. Asked her to put that in writing. She didn't want to. I insisted. Within an hour, an email arrived acknowledging that the western corridor crossed my property and that HOA utility access depended on my continued cooperation. That email was leverage. Because easements aren't favors. They're agreements. And agreements can be enforced or suspended when one side breaches first. My lawyer sent a response that afternoon. It was short. The HOA had unlawfully blocked my primary exit, creating a safety risk. Until that obstruction was removed and written assurances provided, all non-emergency access across my land would be paused. Utilities included. The effect was immediate. By evening, the HOA board scheduled an emergency meeting. Notices went out to residents. Rumors spread fast about internet outages, service interruptions, and legal issues with access. Neighbors started calling me directly. Some were polite. Some were anxious. A few were angry. I didn't argue with any of them. I said the same thing every time. I just want to leave my property when I choose. That night, the gate remained locked. But the pressure had shifted. They weren't containing me anymore. They were depending on me. And for the first time since the fence went up, the HOA understood that controlling access cuts both ways. Especially when the only exit they truly needed was the one they never bothered to confirm. By the end of the week, their attorney reached out. Not with demands. With questions. About timelines. About restoration. About how quickly things could return to normal. Normal, it turned out, required acknowledging something they'd spent years overlooking. The HOA didn't own the land that kept their community connected. I did. And until they unlocked my way out, there stayed very much in question. The gate came down on a Friday morning. No announcement. No apology. Just a work crew unbolting hinges and stacking panels onto a flatbed as if the whole thing had been a temporary misunderstanding. The lock was cut, not unlocked, an unintentional admission that there was no authority behind it to begin with. I watched from my driveway. No gloating. No commentary. Just quiet confirmation. An hour later, I received an email from the HOA's attorney. It acknowledged that the installation of the fencing had unintentionally restricted lawful access to my property. It confirmed the gate would not be reinstalled and that no future access controls would be placed without written consent from all affected property owners. It stopped just short of the word wrong. That afternoon, my lawyer replied. She accepted the restoration of access. She also included a proposed amendment to the existing easement agreement, one the HOA had relied on for utilities and emergency services. The amendment clarified boundaries, limited access hours, required notice, and, most importantly, included penalties for obstruction. Real ones. If they blocked my exit again, even temporarily, the easement would suspend automatically. No hearings. No votes. No delays. The HOA asked for time to review. We gave them 48 hours. During that window, something interesting happened. Residents started asking questions. Why had the HOA installed fencing without a vote? Why hadn't property surveys been reviewed? Why was a single board decision allowed to trap someone inside their own land? Those questions spread faster than any official notice ever had. By Sunday night, the HOA president resigned. No explanation. No farewell message. Just a quiet update on the website. Board vacancy. Interim appointment pending. The emergency meeting scheduled earlier that week was canceled. Replaced with a listening session. That's usually what organizations call it when they realize they've spoken too loudly for too long. On Monday, the HOA signed the amendment. Every clause. No revisions. No counteroffers. Utilities resumed normal access. Service trucks crossed my land again, this time after calling ahead, logging entry, and leaving exactly when they said they would. Order replaced assumption. The fence posts were removed entirely by midweek. Grass was reseeded. The land looked almost untouched, except for the tire marks that would fade with time. But the lesson wouldn't, because the HOA hadn't just overreached. They'd revealed something fundamental. They'd built their sense of control on convenience, not consent. On habit, not ownership. And the moment someone quietly checked the map instead of the mood, the whole thing unraveled. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to threaten. I just needed to stand still long enough for them to realize that the only way out, the one they truly depended on, ran straight through ground they never had the right to fence in the first place. Life returned to normal faster than I expected. The gate was gone. The fencing never came back. I drove my usual route without stopping, without thinking, the way you only notice freedom once someone tries to take it away. The HOA stayed quiet after that. New board members were appointed. Procedures were updated. Property verification became a mandatory step before any construction or access control project. Contractors were required to confirm boundaries in writing. Lawyers reviewed plans before shovels touched soil. All of it came too late to matter to me, but not too late to matter at all. The western corridor remained exactly as it had always been. Gravel, trees, and a narrow strip of land most people never thought about. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't visible from the main road. But it mattered. Because it was proof that ownership doesn't announce itself. It just exists, recorded and enforceable, whether anyone pays attention or not. Neighbors who'd once avoided eye contact started waving again. A few apologized quietly. Others asked questions: how I'd known, what I'd checked, why I hadn't just broken the lock. I told them the truth. If I'd reacted emotionally, I'd still be explaining myself. Instead, I let the paperwork speak. The county closed its inquiry with a short letter confirming that my access had been unlawfully restricted and that corrective action had been taken. No fines. No headlines. Just a record. And records are what last. Every now and then, I drive the western route on purpose. Not because I need to, but because I can. It reminds me how easily people mistake convenience for authority, and how quickly that illusion collapses when someone checks the map instead of a narrative. The HOA thought they'd built a barrier. What they'd actually done was draw a line, one that showed exactly who owned what and who didn't. They locked me in, until they realized the only exit that truly mattered was mine. Quiet justice doesn't rush. It waits, documented and patient, until the gate opens and stays open on its own terms.